A video recently went viral of an interaction with a resident of Minneapolis and ICE agents. And I think the reason it went viral is that it was astonishing for how the woman stood up to the ICE agents by refusing to answer their questions, and then how the ICE agents went within the lines and then outside the lines of what the law allows them to do, using certain kinds of tactics. And if those tactics are even more of a general pattern, it would raise even more serious concerns. But I asked an expert on this topic, friend, colleague of mine, who we do many videos together, Andrew Weissman, if he could help me dissect the interaction frame by frame to give you a sense of, like, what are the constitutional lines for this individual, this civilian? What are the legal limits that ICE agents, federal agents themselves should be trained to abide by? So here we are, Andrew and I, discussing the video frame by frame. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Good. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're going to do is an exercise here of playing a very short video of an encounter that occurred in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the last 72 hours with an apparent ICE agent and a resident of Minneapolis. And it looks as though the ICE agents are conducting what might be a citizenship check or a legal status check of the individual. And we want to just break this down because it's a video that went viral, but break it down from a legal perspective. One could think of this as the way I'm thinking of it. I think the way we both thought of it coming into this is it's either like a know your rights for the average person, or it's a training manual here, a training exercise for the average federal agent, so that they should, both sides should know what the law is, so that individuals can know what their rights are, and that federal agents can act within the bounds of their legal authority and not outside of constitutional rights and the like.
Absolutely. And this is an area, I teach, and it's really important for individuals to understand their rights. It's something, I teach law students, but unfortunately now everyone needs to know it in light of what we know is going on just around the country. The video that's short that we're going to play, just so people understand how we're going to proceed, we're going to play the whole thing. This is a video that was apparently taken by the person of the encounter. There's no trigger warning here. There's nothing terrible that happens. So, we've obviously seen a lot of terrible videos recently. The person does leave. And so, they're not, there's no shooting, et cetera. So don't worry about that. We're then going to go back over it, and Ryan's going to ask me sort of about key parts of that explain both Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights that you have, and Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights that the agents are supposed to be honoring. So with that, let's go to the videotape.
Great.
Do you have an ID on you, ma'am?
I don't need an ID to walk around in my city. This is my
Okay,
city.
do you have
This is
some
my
ID
home.
then, please?
I don't need an
If
ID.
not, we're going to put you in the vehicle and we're going to ID you.
Don't need ID.
Huh?
I am not going to take out. You take out your ID.
You don't have an ID?
I am not going to take out an ID.
Hey man, it's
I am
gonna
U.S.
happen either
citizen.
way.
I am U.S. citizen.
All right, can we see an ID, please?
I am U.S. citizen. I don't need to carry around an ID in my home.
Well,
This is my home.
Where were you born?
This is my home.
Where were you born?
Minneapolis is my home.
Ma'am, that's not,
This is-
we're
this-
doing an immigration check, we're doing a
This is-
citizen
this
check,
is- this is
and
where-
we're asking you where you were born.
This is where I belong. This is my home.
Ma'am, you
and
can belong here, but where were you born?
And I am not going to give you an ID.
Then we're going to put you in the vehicle until we can ID you.
I belong here. I should be walking around here free. I shouldn't be afraid in my life at this point.
Ma'am, do you have an
You
ID
making
to
me
give
a
us?
skirt? No.
Yes, you're correct.
You making me a scare. You making me a
Do you
panic.
have an ID?
This is my home.
Ma'am, where were you born?
I am U.S. citizen. I am U.S. citizen. And I don't think so you have a right to picture me while I am in my home and walking around in my home. This is not acceptable. You guys, you're terrorizing people,
Ma'am,
and it's not
where
acceptable.
were you born?
It doesn't matter where I was born. I belong here. I am U.S. citizen. What else can I say? I am citizen. This is my home.
You realize that if you lie that you're a U.S. citizen,
Minneapolis is my home.
then you can get
Minneapolis is
federal
my
charges.
home. I belong here. I'm sorry. I belong here.
yeah.
I'm not gonna take out an ID. What the fuck?
Okay, so having seen the video, Andrew, do you want to just start out at a very high level of what are, when you say Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, what are we talking about here in terms of just a general legal framework? And then we can go frame by frame almost of the exchange between these individuals to kind of map out how the law grafts onto what happened.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to this don't worry for people. It's not going to be like law school. I'm not going to take you totally into the weeds, but let me just give you that big overview. When agents approach somebody on the street, in order to comply with the Fourth Amendment, um, they can either go up to somebody and sort of respectfully and politely ask questions because they're trying to do that with the consent of the person. That can be a person who's a citizen. It can be a person who's not a citizen. It's a person in the United States. People in the United States are protected by the Fourth Amendment. So one way for the agents to proceed is consensually, and that's sort of an area of law, and that is not complicated in the sense that the only reason the agents are allowed to do something is because you, as a citizen or just a person in this country, are agreeing to it, either in words or by your actions, meaning you start replying to questions. The other way that the agents can take action is if they have what is called factual predication of some sort of wrongdoing or illegality or immigration violation. They have to have some individual facts about you. So if they don't know anything about you, that means there's no factual predication. They can only operate by consent. Um, if, however, let's just say I'm the ICE agent and I was conducting an investigation of Ryan Goodman and I actually have a lot of information of wrongdoing. Obviously, this is a hypothetical because that would never be the case. I see Ryan's not laughing in any way, shape, or form. That's because, as a lot of my students tell me, I'm not funny. Um, so, if they have some facts to say, okay, you've developed that, Ryan and Goodman is doing X, Y, and Z, and there's reason to believe that, and there's uh, some 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 factual predication, then they have the ability to stop you and say, I'm going to ask you questions. They can even do sort of a frisk to see if you have a weapon, if they believe and can articulate why they think you're carrying a weapon. And obviously, if they have even more factual predication and they think they have enough to arrest you, they could do that. But the Fourth Amendment requires that you can't just be picked out of a hat. Just there's no way to stop you. There's no way to arrest you if they don't have that factual predication.
And just to spell out a couple pieces of it. So, to stop a person and frisk them, that momentary stop does require some factual predicate. What's the like threshold of proof? What's the kind of factual predicate they need to just stop somebody, frisk them? And then what's the threshold? What's the factual predicate needed to actually arrest somebody, as in apprehend them and
Yeah.
conduct something that's point
So on
based?
the criminal side, there's sort of three levels. There's nothing, in which case it can only be by consent. There, to do a stop and a frisk, you have to have what's called reasonable suspicion. That's a low level quantum of proof, reasonable suspicion that the person has committed a crime. That would allow you to stop the person and ask them questions. And if you have independent, reasonable suspicion that they might be armed, you can then do a brief pat down of their outer clothing. It's a limited search, just to be clear. It's not like a thorough search of the person. And there's a lot of law and a lot of nuances to what's called a stop versus the next level that you asked about, Ryan, which is an arrest. Because most people are going to be like, what's the difference between a stop and an arrest? And I'll give you an example. But obviously, it can be gray around the edges as to when a stop becomes an arrest. For an arrest, you have to have a higher standard of proof, which is probable cause that the person committed a crime. And then they can actually be handcuffed and taken down to a station, and it's a full-blown arrest. Um, the things that you look at to see whether something is consensual versus a stop, or a stop becomes an arrest, that sort of continuum, is how many agents are present? Do they have guns drawn? What is the tone of voice in terms of how they're speaking to you? Are they giving commands to you as directing you to do something, which they may, of course, not be entitled to do? Um, are they physically touching you? All of those are factors that go in. A really important factor is, what are they telling you about whether you're under arrest or whether you're required to stop? Are they saying you are under arrest? Are they saying, you're not under arrest, but we'd like to ask you questions? What those kinds of things, like a very good agent, and this is pursuant to rules, for instance, that used to exist at the FBI, a very good agent would say, if they only have consent and they don't have any factual predication, an agent is entitled to ask anybody anything consensually, because they're doing it based on the consent of the person they're talking to. And they would say, Professor Goodman, I was wondering if you would talk to us for a moment about X. You're not under arrest, you're not a suspect, but I wonder if you had some time to speak with us. And then you might say, do I have to? And a good agent would say, absolutely not. You don't have to talk with us. If you do start to talk with us, you can change your mind. It's not required. That's sort of the sort of ideal scenario. That is not what we are seeing when you have agents who are not trained, or agents who are trained but trained badly, who may want to give the impression that the person is under arrest, that the person has to respond to these questions. But if the government doesn't have that factual predication, you don't have to respond at all. That's all Fourth Amendment law. And then we can talk a little bit about the Fifth Amendment, which is that under the Fifth Amendment, which I think most people know, which is that if you have a belief, a good faith belief, that a truthful answer to a question that the government's going to ask you would tend to incriminate you. They asked you, where you were yesterday, and yesterday you were committing a bank robbery. You can say, I'm refusing to answer that question based on the Fifth Amendment. You don't have to, you can do that. That's an absolute constitutional right. And again, that applies to everyone in this country. Some people have said, wait a second, this only applies to citizens. That's not the way it works. The Fourth and Fifth Amendment applies to everyone in the country, whether you're here in a documented way or an undocumented way. Everyone enjoys, for the moment, until the Supreme Court says otherwise, and they haven't yet said that the Fourth and Fifth Amendment applies to everyone.
Right. And what's so astonishing, I think part of the reason this video goes viral is the way in which this person interacts with the agents, in a sense, maybe inherently knowing some of her rights, and the ways in which the agents kind of respect the line and then don't necessarily respect the line. So I think let's just break
So
it
let's
down.
go through it. Let's go through it, because I'd love to point out where I think the lines are crossed.
Right. So let's do it with the opening. So in the opening, she says, I'm a US citizen, and they say, well, do you have any ID on you, ma'am? And then they say, do you have a little bit more? And then they say, do you have some ID then, please? Question mark. And we'll just play the clip.
Do you have an ID on you, ma'am?
I don't need an ID to walk around in my city. This is my
Okay,
city.
do you have
This is
some
my
ID
home.
then, please?
So here, just to be clear, unless there was more, now we don't know the full context, but and we don't know the number of people, and we don't know if their guns were drawn, et cetera. But let's just take facially what appears to be the case here. It may feel intimidating to the person, but the law doesn't require, and some people like me think it should, but the law doesn't require the agents to say, you don't have to answer. You don't have to tell the person their rights. So it is fine for an agent to go up to someone and say, do you have an ID on you, ma'am? And when I say fine, I mean constitutionally. There is nothing wrong with that. They are asking the person to do it voluntarily. They are not telling them that it's voluntary. And that means that later it could be challenged. But here, on the face of it, even though it may be intimidating to people, have an agent come up and do this, and even if there obviously was more than one agent, this appears to be fine. It's fine to repeat it. Do you have some ID then? Please. The words please and ma'am are things that the government would use to say, look, we were just trying to do this in a consensual way. It's probably pretty clear they don't have factual predication for a stop or for an arrest, because I suspect if they did, they would have done it, given what happened here and given sort of what ICE has been doing. Let's turn there to like this is so far people are like, okay, you seem very charitable, but let's turn to the very next thing
Yep.
that's said.
I don't need
If not, we're going to put you in the vehicle and we're going to ID you.
Okay. So there the agent referred to threatening, I would say, to put the individual in their vehicle.
Yeah. So the person says, the individual, the human, who's a civilian, says, "I don't need an ID," and that's true. Just to be clear, this country is not Germany in the 1930s. You do not need to carry papers with you. You are entitled to say, I don't need an ID. This person's like, I'm a citizen. I don't need an ID. Just to be clear, this person didn't even have to talk to them, right? That's like, it's fine to talk to them. I want to be clear. I'm not advising that you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying that as a matter of your rights, you don't have to talk to them. Here, the person did and said, I'm a citizen. It's my city. I'm entitled to walk around. I don't need an ID. That's all very good. But the person doesn't have to say any of that. But this is where there is a clear line crossed. We're going to put you in the vehicle. In order to do that, that is at the very least, that is a physical stop, that they would physically take the person and move them into a vehicle. To do that, you would at very least need reasonable suspicion. You may need probable cause that the person you're talking to has committed a crime. You are not entitled to just say to someone, if you don't show me your ID, I'm putting you in the vehicle. That is unlawful under the federal constitution, absent having that factual predication. Here, there's nothing to suggest they do have that factual predication. And it's coercive, so that anything that happens after that is not going to be consensual. In other words, if you say to somebody, it's like putting a gun to their head, answer the question, I don't want to. And they said, okay, well, if you don't, I'm going to shoot you. And you answer, that is not consensual. That's under duress. In the same way that if you say, we're going to put you in the vehicle, especially what's going on right now, you might be terrified of that prospect. And just to be clear, without factual predication, this is a constitutional violation that has been filmed by the civilian.
Huh?
I am not going to take out. You take out your ID.
You don't have an ID?
I am not going to take out an ID.
Hey man, it's
I am
gonna
U.S.
happen either
citizen.
way.
I am U.S. citizen.
All right, can we see an ID, please?
I am U.S. citizen. I don't need to carry around an ID in my home.
Well,
This is
where
my
were you,
home.
Where were you born?
This is my home.
Where were you born,
Minneapolis is my home.
ma'am? That's not
This
that.
is-
We're
this-
doing an immigration check. We're doing a
This is-
citizen
this
check.
is- this is
and
where-
we're asking you where you were born.
This is where I belong. This is my home.
Ma'am, you
and
can
I,
belong here, but where were you
and
born?
I am not going to give you an ID.
Then we're going to put you in the vehicle until
I
we can
belong.
ID you.
The civilian says, I'm not going to take out my ID. And the officer says, hey, ma'am, which again shows some level of respect. In other words, like I'm not saying it's great. You know what my thought was previously, but again, it's not like there's many, unfortunately, I've seen many harsher situations. But here it's, hey, ma'am, that's the respectful part, but then it's going to happen either way. Well, no, it's not. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say you're going to be giving that voluntarily or not voluntarily. That vitiates, that gets rid of any consent. Remember, the only way the agents have a right to be doing this is because you are consenting. So here, obviously, the person's not consenting, and the agents have to abide by that. This then continues. They continue asking questions. Now, that's fine. They are entitled to continue asking questions, but given what they've been saying, they've now tainted anything because they've threatened to put her in a car. They've threatened to say it's going to happen no matter what. They then continue to ask questions about where was she born. And then let me turn to this part where it says, we're doing an immigration check. That is almost deliberately ambiguous in terms of what it's saying. The agents may be doing what they hope is an immigration check. I mean, what's accurate is they're trying to do an immigration check, but they're not doing an authorized immigration check that allows them to stop everyone and demand that they answer questions because it's required under the law. So when they say we're doing an immigration check, that may lead a person to think, oh, I guess I have to comply. But that would be wrong, absent, again, that factual predication that I talked about. And then, just to be clear, even with factual predication, you do still have a Fifth Amendment right. So, for instance, let's say you were in the country and you were undocumented, if you thought you had a Fifth Amendment right. Now, it gets complicated, but you don't have to speak under those circumstances. You can say, I assert my Fifth Amendment. There may be consequences to doing that, but again, in terms of forcing you to speak, the Fifth Amendment protects you.
Right.
And again, it goes on, and the agents, again, in my view, cross a line because they don't seem to have factual predication when they say, we're going to put you in the vehicle to make can ID you. And so, again, that would be physically. Remember, I said physical touching is like you need factual predication. You can't just pick people up off the street and move them. I think people don't understand that. They also don't understand that while the officers are entitled to speak to you, to try to get information out of you, you are simultaneously entitled to speak to them or not to speak to them. So I don't think people really understand that the agents could talk to you and you can just be like, not in the mood. I don't want to. Or you could be like me. I tend to be, for various reasons, I tend to be like, what is your question and how can I help? People have different responses, but that's all an individual choice that you are entitled to make when the government is proceeding only based on your consent. So that's, again, I'm beating a dead horse, but I just want people to understand in that situation, you are the master of what's going to happen because the only basis, absent them having evidence of a crime, is you're consenting to it. So if you want to do something, you just articulate that, which is, I don't want to talk to you. I'm going to continue walking.
I belong here. I should be walking around here free. I shouldn't be afraid in my life at this point.
Ma'am, do you have an ID
making
to
me
give
a
us?
skirt? No.
Yes, you're correct.
You making me a skirt. You making me a
Do you
panic.
have an ID?
This is my home.
Ma'am, where were you born?
I am U.S. citizen. I am U.S. citizen. And I don't think so you have a right to picture me while I am in my home and walking around in my home. This is not acceptable. You guys, you're terrorizing people,
Ma'am,
and it's not
where
acceptable.
were you born?
It doesn't matter where I was born. I belong here. I am U.S. citizen. What else can I say? I am citizen. This is my home.
You realize that if you lie that you're a U.S. citizen,
Minneapolis is my home.
then you can get
Minneapolis is
federal
my
charges.
home. I belong here. I'm sorry. I belong here. I'm not going to take out an ID.
I do want to just focus at the very end. The agent does say, you realize that if you lie, that you're a US citizen, Minneapolis is my home, that you can get federal charges. Um, so the statement by the agent that if you are lying to me, you could face federal charges. I just, again, let's pretend that everything beforehand didn't happen, so we have just a clear illustration. Um, that is a correct statement of the law. It is a crime, even if you are not under oath, to make a material false statement. In other words, by material, I mean if you say my favorite color is blue, but your favorite color is green, that's immaterial. Like no one cares. I mean, you may care, but no one cares. And it is true, even though you're not under oath, that if you lie to a federal officer, it is true that you could face what are called false statement charges. Many people, I've prosecuted many cases like that. So, an agent saying that, it may seem scary. It may be intended to intimidate. It may be intended just to inform you of what the consequences are, to impress on you that if you're choosing to speak, you should know the consequences. In many situations, usually when I was meeting with an agent and then I would be meeting with a witness and their counsel in a much different setting than the one we're seeing here, I would definitely go through their rights and their obligations, and I would tell them about if they were to lie. I'd say I have no reason to think you would. But I want to make sure that you understand not just your rights here, your Fifth Amendment rights, but your obligations. So the agent saying that you could face charges if you lie is actually a perfectly fine statement to make. It is one reason, though, that if people who are listening to this and are thinking about if they are confronted with agents, they really need to think about if they are going to speak. And again, I'm not advising you to speak or not to speak. If you choose to speak, you do need to remember you have to be honest legally. If you're not, you do put yourself in legal jeopardy. The other thing, just to be clear, is if you choose to speak and start speaking, you can stop at any point. Just because you decide to speak a little bit doesn't mean you have to continue speaking. You can decide, you know what? I don't like these people. I don't trust these people. Or you could just be like, I'm busy. I need to get my bus to go to work. I'm finished here. It is also fine to ask the agents questions because one of the things that most civilians don't know is they don't know, am I being stopped? Like, do I have to stop and talk to you? And are you arresting me? And so you can ask the agents that. They may not answer you, but you can say, am I required to speak to you? Am I under arrest? Um, are you stopping me against my will, or am I
Mm.
free to leave? A really good question is, am I free to leave? And again, you may not get a response, but you're entitled in the same way that they're entitled to ask you questions that you don't have to answer, or you can answer. You can ask them questions that helps form your judgment about what you might want to do.
Right. And that's one of the reasons I found the video so astonishing is the resolve that this civilian had in the sense of I do not need to answer your questions. And she was on her constitutional ground to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And that's why, just so people understand, that's why we're doing this, is to sort of underscore that what she did was correct, but we wanted to sort of educate people about sort of what we are thinking about in terms of the law that's sort of undergirding this interaction.
great. And I just want to, I guess, finish with one other question that people might have on their minds, which is we don't know what happened before the video starts. And if it's, in one scenario, it's ICE agents stopping every person that passes them by, or every third person. One, two, stop. One, two, three, stop. On the other, another scenario is they're stopping a person on the basis of their apparent ethnicity or race. Right. Because I think in the way in which we started this conversation, we just said, if the agent's just asking a question, they've got no suspicion, no basis of anything. And I think somebody hearing that might think, well, wait a minute. Well, what if in the agent's calculus is they're saying, okay, that's a woman of color. I'm going to ask her.
Right.
Um, how,
So
yeah,
yeah. So a lot of times the person, that's a lot of that may be something that's fleshed out and understood after the fact. A lot of what we're talking about is like what happens if someone suddenly comes up and starts doing this and you don't know what's going on. You don't know why they pulled you over, like why they're coming up to you. You may not know whether they're doing this based on race, whether they're doing it on every third person. You may not
yeah,
know any of that. To be clear, to be clear, you cannot do the stops based on race. Period. The end. Like there's been a lot of Supreme Court cases that a lot of people disagree with, but that have broadened what the agents can do. You cannot do that. So it cannot be on what are called suspect classifications. It cannot be based on race, ethnicity, um, sex, all sorts of things that are sort of immutable characteristics. That cannot be the basis for pulling you over. Um, uh, if you have a sort of a roadblock situation where you are sort of stopping seemingly everyone, the court's going to be looking at a lot of factors to decide whether the police are entitled to do that. That is where it's harder for an individual to challenge that in an individual setting. Um, but there are a lot of very famous cases on this. But the thing that the court looks for in those cases is a non-criminal reason that the police are doing this, that they're not doing it to catch people in criminal conduct. And the second thing they look at, which is really important for the court, is they look to see that there are neutral reasons for why you, Ryan Goodman, are being selected. Meaning, as you said, is it every third person? So you just happen to be the third person. But it's not because of your race, ethnicity, gender. So they're looking for neutral reasons that go into that, so that the police don't have the discretion to harass people and single people out. But that's generally not what we're seeing in terms of this scenario. But it's true we don't know what happened beforehand. So, for instance, let me give you an example of what could have happened that could have tainted the whole thing, which is before this happened, the agents run up to this person and say, "Stop what you're doing. We're asking you questions and you need to answer them." So that at the very least is what's called a Terry stop. That she's been ordered to stop, to not move. That is a restriction on her liberty. That is why it's a Fourth Amendment event that has happened. That is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. And just remember, a seizure can happen even without physical touching. If you're ordered to stop and you stop, that is a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. So there better be a good reason that the
mhm,
police have facts about you. They're not entitled to just tell you to just stop. You're free to. That's why this person was so right to, like, seemingly, because there's no factual predication that appears to say I'm free to do whatever I want. I
right.
can walk around and I don't have to show ID. I don't have to carry ID. So it was really what's great here is that you have someone who really does seem to understand their rights. And what we want to do is make sure people understand all of those parameters.
Great. And then let's just finish with one other point, which is it's not part of the verbal interaction, but we can see in the video, and we can play it once again, just this last part, where one of the agents seems to be coming up to her during the final closing part of the videoed interaction and is filming her with his camera.
Yeah.
And let's assume that what he's doing there is picking up as much data as he can for the purposes of facial recognition, so that, yes, she's not revealing who she is to them, she's not providing ID, but they'll use this opportunity to put her into a database in which maybe in the future they'll be able to identify her and do something from there. What about that, the obtaining of her facial recognition information?
Yeah. So
Under
it
the
looked,
circumstances of stopping her, not just from afar, from across the street, but
yeah.
in an encounter.
And I don't think so you have a right to picture me while I am in my home and walking around in my home. This is not acceptable.
If there's been a violation beforehand, then she may have an argument to say that should be suppressed. And I want to, but she'd have to bring a motion, she'd have to bring a civil case, and it'd be complicated. Um, this is an evolving area of the law because of technology. The general rule had been for decades and decades, if you're walking down the street and anyone can see you and they can see your face and they can see your clothes, so you're sort of everything that's exposed to the public, then if the police do just what any civilian could do and they take a photo of you, that's fine. That had been the law, and even in the Supreme Court currently, that is the law. There are cases bubbling up because of things like license plate readers, where um, police officers and police departments scan license plates going through certain locations. And there have been challenges to that because you create these huge databases of information. And there's this issue of and the argument that privacy protective groups argue is, I may have exposed my face to civilians. I didn't expose my face to the government for the purposes of it being put in a permanent database where you are holding it, and creating that sort of net, that dragnet for the future is beyond the pale. This comes up within DNA, where the Supreme Court has dealt with the taking of DNA from prisoners when they're arrested, and was very, very troubled by that and the idea that you would create this huge database of DNA of people so that you could delve into it in the future. So this is an evolving area, but for the current moment, that is not, if I were the person being stopped, if I was interested in advancing the law, I might talk to a lawyer later and talk about it. But in
Right.
terms of interacting with federal authorities,
Yeah.
this is an area where it'd be very respectful because there is not clear law at all to support the proposition that this is a violation of law.
Great.
What the agents did here by taking the photo.
Yeah. Great in terms of just a great public education to go through this with you. So thanks so much for doing this. And I think we'll probably have, unfortunately, other opportunities to do the same.
Well, this is one where, given what happened in Minnesota, and that we're seeing billions with a B of dollars being spent on ICE, and it doesn't seem like the training, based on not just videos, but also decisions like the decision by Judge Beryl Howell in Washington, D.C., where she articulates how much ICE is violating the Fourth Amendment, that they don't when we started by talking about, you asked me the question about um, reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Well, one quick anecdote from her decision is ICE and DHS gets it wrong. they say we're allowed to do arrests of people just based on reasonable suspicion. That is the, I know this, most people who are not lawyers are going to think, well, that doesn't sound so egregious to me. But as a lawyer, that is the most egregious thing ever. An arrest has to be based on probable cause. It was so egregious that Justice Kavanaugh, on whom they said that DHS was saying, oh, that's who we're sort of relying on for
Right.
that proposition, he had to sort of issue a footnote saying, that's not what I said.
Right.
And so it's so useful to do this. I'm glad, frankly, Ryan, you had the idea to do it. I do agree with you that it's going to happen more because of what appears to be real lack of training, up to and including very, very senior people in these agencies who continued to articulate the wrong legal standard. And obviously, there are very significant issues that we're not going to get into here in terms of the shooting of Ms. Good, about whether that was legally justified, and whether those internal rules and external rules about what officers can do. That is maybe the final thing I will say, Ryan, which is that given what we have seen, it is useful to act respectfully because we have seen agents overreact. And you want to make sure that, well, they're agents who don't seem to be de-escalating. You have to be, nothing that we say here is trying to encourage people to put themselves in harm's way.
Right. Right. Great. And there's so many other items that we might be able to discuss in future exchanges like this, including I think people are concerned about looks like agents who don't understand the rights of individuals to film them and their interactions and
Absolutely.
things like that. So great. Great to have this conversation with you, Andrew.
Thank you, Ron.